Renewing my faith in music. Madonna, Michelle Indeggio-Cello, Lee John and Byron Stingley, Zed Soul, the Womack Sisters. Now, let me say from the jump that I have never lost my faith in music, and in particular soul music, as the bedrock, tapestry, and foundation of my current incarnation. It's true that the R&B and soul sounds that nurtured me, provided comfort, frequently brought joy in the midst of pain, energized me, gave cause for celebration, and was, more times than I can remember, the soothing balm for a love gone bad, a few sleepless nights, and not just Tuesday heartbreaks, with a nod to the Wonder Man, have decidedly changed, as have I. My life has been informed in many ways by songs that are embedded deep into my interesting psyche. Randomly, You're Gonna Make Me Love Somebody Else, the Jones Girls. Be Thankful for What You Got, William DeVaughn. Payback Is A Dog, the Stylistics. Optimistic, Sounds of Blackness. Tired of Being Alone, Al Green. Surrender, Diana Ross. Baby, Hang Up the Phone, Carl Graves. I Know You, I Live You, Chaka Khan. Giving Love, Voices of East Harlem. Make Me a Believer, Luther Vandross. Can't Hide Love, Earth, Wind and Fire. And Until You Come Back to Me, Aretha Franklin, are just a minuscule glimpse into the treasure trove of tunes that have been my musical companions through these many decades of my as-lived experiences, and I ain't ashamed to say so. Which, dear reader, with apologies to British fans for borrowing from Lady Whistledown, brings me fortuitously to the title of this post. True that in the last decade there hasn't been a whole lot of music by legendary or contemporary artists that held my attention for more than a little while, which may have as much to do with how my own life path has changed, just like everybody else's. Nothing, as Bernard Igna so eloquently stated, stays the same. It's the nature of our human journey that we change, and if we resist change, it makes no difference anyway, and often makes the pathway harder and tougher. A wise man once noted that it's best to ride the horse in the direction it's going. Give the brief tangentizing, as I like to call it. Essentially, there have been some bright spots in the music I've heard and the shows I've seen, but not what I call a tidal wave of songs or performances that have fueled my fire, like music from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and a little of the 90s. Then, somewhat unexpectedly in the last few weeks, my attention has been drawn to a few recordings and one video that brought much enthusiasm and renewal to my essential love and passion for music itself. And in all these specific instances, not what you might think my British ambassador soul Monica will be enchanted by. Madonna, Good for the Soul. I'm fessing up. I lived in New York City when Madonna's arrival on the music scene, with all the hype that surrounded it, basically left me mucho disinterested. I knew she'd work with my good friend Reggie Lucas, something that in the world of really we had in common, since Reggie and musical partner Mtume had actually produced a full-on, never-released recording with me as a soulful vocalist. Some of her early recordings were bouncy and breezy, Holiday, Borderline. I may even have smiled at Like a Virgin, a state that was just a vague memory for me in 1984. Through all that the world of Madonna offered in the years that followed, I paid scant attention. Although, in the interest of transparency, I was quite happy to work with a few of the artists that were signed to her Maverick Records label in the 90s as a media coach and bio writer, including N-Phase and Dalvin the Great. One album, 1998's Ray of Light, piqued my interest, signaling what seemed like a personal and musical transformation for Madonna. That the track Shanti Ashtanki was sung entirely in Sanskrit was a particular revelation, and it remains a favorite, if truth be told, not on my regular playlist. For the most part, I never paid heed to what Lady Madonna was up to, or as far as recording went, not up to. Politely and not personally, she was not on my radar until my dear friend, colleague, and fellow Substacker Tim Dillinger, with whom I have regular conversations, mentioned the release of Confessions 2, the first new album by Madonna in 7 years. I confessed to Tim, with no pun intended, that I was somewhat surprised that Madonna was an artist he had any particular affinity for or interest in, given his deep love for gospel, soul, and related genres. In his recent Substack post, Madonna, the Gospel CCM Connections, Tim shared that as a child of the 1980s, her music remains important to him. When Tim started to wax lyrical about Confessions 2, I listened. I value his opinions when it comes to music. Anyone who shows a passion, as do I, for artists such as Laura Nyro and Tina Marie knows a thing or 20 about real when it comes to music. Tim suggested I give the new Madonna album a try, explaining that given my years in New York in the mid-70s through the early 80s, and in particular the many Saturday nights into early Sunday mornings spent at clubs like the famed Paradise Garage, I just might enjoy some of the dance flavored tracks on Confessions too. I listened to the entire album a couple of times over and had to confess that it really resonated with me, as Tim had suggested it might. Now it takes something for me to add a new recording to my Like Songs playlist, which consists of classics like Blessed, The Emotions, At the Concert, Roberta Flack and Michael Henderson, and Same Old Love, Anita Baker. Good for the Soul hit the spot. Given my deep interest in matters of the soul, I was drawn in, no surprise, given the track begins with "Everything begins with consciousness," a quote from French philosopher Albert Camus. Lyric lines like echoes of voices recalling the time, "We will be one, we will be divine, time is a river we cannot unwind," along with a propulsive rhythm, almost had me dancing on a London bus when it came up on my playlist. When I shared my enthusiasm with Tim on our next call, he was not surprised. I told him that the lyrics on Good for the Soul, in particular, along with the other songs on the album, seemed to reflect Madonna's own personal journey, and he agreed. The album is a potent reminder that any judgment we may form about the creative journey of an artist who has stood the test of time, no easy endeavor in this fast-paced digital age, is worthy of review, indeed. Michelle Andegiocello and Cynthia Erivo. I knew you were waiting for me. Yes, the second biggest pop hit that the Queen of Soul, my dear Aretha Franklin, had in her illustrious recording career, the first being her anthemic reading of Otis Redding's Respect in 1967, was a duet with George Michael some 2 decades later, and the subject of another recent conversation with my friend Tim. He had written another Substack post, 1986, I Want to Be in the Mainstream Too, in which he shared how the song was, and I quote, a testimony of survival and victory that summarized in some ways Franklin's own climb back to the top. When Tim and I were talking further about the recording, I recognized that Clive Davis at Arista was indeed astute at suggesting the song to Aretha, given whatever personal challenges she had faced in the few years before she recorded it with George. With 1985's Who's Zoomin' Who platinum album and the hit singles therein, Aretha was enjoying a major resurgence, and teaming her with George Michael was a brilliant move. Unbeknownst to either Tim or I, when we were having the conversation in late May, another artist with a connection to the aforementioned Madonna, since her debut album was released on Maverick Records a few decades ago, had recorded a version of I Knew You Were Waiting For Me for her forthcoming album, Synonym. Indeed, slowed down as a duet with Cynthia Erivo and released as the first track from the album of collaborations with a star-studded list of artists and musicians, I Knew You Were Waiting For Me has immediately been added to my Like Songs playlist, a sign of just how much I love Michelle and Cynthia's hypnotic take on the song. As I noted in my chat with Tim, the lyrics of the Aretha George duet are powerful. Heard in this new reimagining of the song resonates in a whole new way for me personally. Michelle Ndegeocello has had a remarkable career, no doubt. A cursory glance of the Wikipedia entry on her reveals that her 1993 set, Plantation Lullabies, was considered by some as heralding the birth of neo-soul, a statement that in hindsight seems debatable. Not for any particular reason, but Michelle's work hasn't often been on my radar, and in doing some research on her extensive discography, I discovered that she had recorded an entire album in 2012 in dedication to Nina Simone, who, for those of you who know my history are aware, jump-started my own lifelong passion and dedication to black music as a teenager in 1965. Checking it out in hindsight, I know that Michelle's repertoire choices for her Pour une âme souveraine, a dedication to Nina Simone, recorded for the Paris-based Naive label, indicate a real awareness of the depth of Nina's catalogue and include some fascinating choices such as Either Way I Lose, Don't Take All Night, Real, and Turn Me On. When it comes to Nina, Michelle clearly knows her stuff. While I get regular emails from prominent UK publicists informing me of various festivals, events, and new releases, not all of them are relevant to my particular musical leaning. That said, the press release about Michelle's third Blue Note album piqued my interest in particular for its choice of repertoire, ranging from tunes associated with Human League, Don't You Want Me, to Roberta Flack and Donny Hathaway, Be Real Black for Me, Sonny and Cher, I Got You Babe, and Dennis Edwards' Don't Look Any Further. Synonym isn't Michelle's first foray into reinvention in her own unique way, with recordings by others. 2018's Ventriloquism ventures into the R&B and pop arena with a daring approach to hits by Sade, Tina Turner, Force MDs, and TLC. Clearly, Michelle Ndegeocello consistently demonstrates a real artist approach, an essential element reminiscent in how Nina, Roberta Flack, Stevie Wonder, Bill Withers, Marvin Gaye, and a few other lesser-known but equally bold artists such as Zulema, DJ Rogers, and John Lucien, interestingly all signed to RCA Records in the 70s, crafted their work. Certainly, I Knew You Were Waiting For Me has led me to go back and check Michelle's catalogue. No doubt there are some of my readers, friends, and colleagues already familiar with her artistry who might ask, what took me so long? Well, everything in its own time, I say. And I look forward with genuine excitement to hearing Synonym when it's released in October, providing another example that the very title of this particular Substack piece holds true. My faith in music continues to be renewed. Lee John and Byron Stingley, Proud and Bold. In the interest of full disclosure, I have known Lee John since I conducted the very first interview he did with his friend and then musical partner Russell Fraser as part of a duo known as Sight and Sound in October 1974 for my Take a Look Around column in Blues and Soul magazine. I still remember, as does Lee, how he and Russell came up to the Contempo office turned record shop on Hanway Street in London one afternoon and boldly asked if I would do an interview for their then first release for EMI. They were both still in school, and truth be told, it was that boldness that had me say yes without having heard the music on a cassette. One late afternoon after they left school, we met at the small bar underneath the Contempo office, and of course, it was orange juice all around. Memories indeed. Lee's career as a recording performing artist began to take shape a few years later, when he, Ashley Ingram, and Errol Kennedy formed the group Imagination, achieving consistent success, in particular in the UK and Europe, with 80s hits like Body Talk, Just an Illusion, a US R&B top 30 charted single, Music and Lights, Changes, and Instinctual, a US dance chart number 1 in 1987. I recall meeting up with the trio at the time I was living in LA, and they were recording the album Closer. And it was good to reunite with Lee, who I would see on occasion during my visits to London. While Imagination continued to record and perform through the 90s, Lee's solo tenure took hold in the 2000s with a series of dance-oriented singles such as Your Mind, Your Body, Your Soul, and a particular note for this Substack post, You Turn Me On, with Byron Stingely of 10 City fame. In 2005, Lee stepped into new musical terrain with a jazz-flavored album, Feel My Soul. I recall seeing his performance at the renowned New Morning Club in Paris, and I was thoroughly impressed with his adept interpretations of a number of classic standards, including a very emotional reading of Billie Holiday's Strange Fruit, no easy task for any performer. All of which, dear reader, again a nod to Lady Whistledown from Bridgerton, leaves me with a long intro to Proud and Bold, released just a few weeks ago, a musical reunion with Lee and Byron Stingely. When I watched the video, which landed in my WhatsApp feed last week, I felt compelled to call Lee to share just how much I loved it, for real. When we spoke, he shared about the song's inspiring statement, noting that he observed so many of the everyday challenges in the world today and penned lyrics that reflect the importance of celebrating self-belief, resilience, unity, and upliftment. The music is vibrant. Lee and Byron's voices gel, and the track could easily have me boogie once more. Well, maybe not quite as well as I used to. That said, it's the video itself that really does it for me, and I've seen more than a few videos in my life and times. It's simply brilliant, and any statement about being proud and bold is always going to get my thumbs up. Check out the video and the tracks with stellar remixes available on all digital platforms. As I listen again, I'm reminded of a few moments in my long-time friendship with Lee, including a hilarious time when we sang together in his house to some of our favorite 70s and 80s dance anthems, including Pieces of Ice by the boss, Diana Ross. Fortunately for one and all, never captured on film or tape. Much like in my reference to both Madonna and Michelle Ndegeocello and their respective abilities to reinvent themselves musically over time, I salute Lee John for his consistent commitment to staying the course, Proud and Bold. Zed Soul, Time to Shine. Put it down to my British upbringing, the cultural leaning to not, for want of a better phrase, big up myself too much, since, by observation, Brits, distinct from their American counterparts, are discouraged from extolling their accomplishments, given the inbuilt British tendency for self-deprecation. How do I know? Well, when I left Britain in 1975 for what turned out to be 3 decades in America, I was immediately struck by the difference in how Americans societally had no issue with speaking proud and bold, referencing the last segment in this post, about their achievements to the point where on occasion I found it irritating. I figured that too much boasting was definitely not appropriate, and letting one's accomplishments speak for themselves was the way to go. Right? No. Wrong. Well, with some moderation, that is. There's a difference between false modesty and being genuinely humble. By observation, I can say that since returning to Britain some 17 years ago, I could tell when underneath the, "Oh, it's no big thing, I was just doing what I do," there could be a seething resentment for not being recognized for what one might have achieved that was worthy of praise. Well, here's my disclaimer for this post. You're about to find out, dear reader, note, I'm now owning the phrase, forget about Lady Whistledown and Bridgerton, that I'm no longer hiding my talents as a really good songwriter. Per Miss Ross, I'm coming out, which brings me to the subject of this 4th section of my renewed faith post, namely the song Time to Shine, one of the 4 tracks I co-wrote with my friend and musical colleague Amar Naik that are on his recent Zed Soul album, Those Words. My work as a songwriter dates back to the late 70s, when, ensconced in New York, I began expressing my aptitude as a lyricist with collaborations with friends like the late John Simmons, later musical director for Stephanie Mills and then Whitney Houston, until his passing in 1989, and Philip Ballou, later longtime touring and session vocalist with Luther Vandross and James Taylor, among others. Neither of them were slouches when it came to their knowledge of music. I also wrote a few tunes myself, and yes, remarkably, I still have cassettes with songs like Everybody Needs Their Dreams, a tune I played for my late father, who felt that any notions of being a recording artist in my own right were unlikely to manifest, since he said I didn't look the part of becoming a pop hitmaker, whatever that meant, but really did like the song. Then, Who You Gonna Choose? With double-track vocals that I sang in falsetto as if I were a Bee Gee, and We Got to Go Our Separate Ways, a straight-up soul-infused blues tune. To reference the Carpenters, that was long ago and oh so far away. In the 80s, I continued my songwriting exploits with another friend, the talented Byron Motley, and others, with sadly little result in terms of placement. I did consider that just maybe it was because being known as a music journalist within the music biz might have affected whether producers and artists took me seriously as a composer. Who knows? My continuing passion for expressing myself as a lyricist finally began to flourish and result in recordings by others when I began to collaborate with the multi-talented producer, songwriter, and musician, Mr. Preston Glass. Together we've co-written and have had recordings on several songs, and seeing my name as a credit on tunes by the likes of The Spinners, Russell Tompkins Jr., Chubby Tavares, and others has been amazing. My collaborations with Amar and Zed Soul began a few years ago, and with the release of the Zed Soul debut set, which has deservedly received a great response from the UK soul music community and beyond, I'm thrilled that songs like Who's Gonna Rescue My Heart, and in particular Time to Shine, are being heard for the first time worldwide. I single out Time to Shine because, much like Lee John and Byron Stingley's aforementioned Proud and Bold, it's all about empowerment, and as the title suggests, stepping up, stepping out, and indeed shining. Amar's great production on the track featuring 13 has easily found its way onto my Like Songs playlist as I bop along on my mostly daily walks. And if I thought nobody knew I was a songwriter, that's become something of a myth, with the recent release of 2 tracks on the Soul City label, which began life all those years ago with John Simmons and Philip Blue, namely the rare groove classic, Ain't Nothing Like the Love, and We'll Be Together. Proof that a good song can be timeless. Move over, Lionel Richie. The Womack Sisters. Just when I thought I had referenced all recent music that seemed worthy of mention in this renewed faith piece, along come the Womack Sisters. Truth be told, the trio's name has somehow been on the outer edges of my consciousness, if only because of the name Womack. Although, yes, there are a few Womacks out there who are not part of the renowned soul music family, like Leanne Womack, an award-winning country singer-songwriter. I can't offer any explanation as to why I slept on the music of these 3 amazing women. Maybe it's just all about timing. What really woke me up to the music that BG, Zemani and Kucha had been making for a few years now was an interview by Alexis Petridis a few days ago in the UK online edition of The Guardian, which is my only go-to for news. Alexis is the head rock and pop critic, a description that always irks me since I don't quite know how one earns the right to be a critic as such. Not personal to Alexis, who I've never met, but not a term I relish or savor. The sisters have been releasing music officially since 2017, with the single Darling, then an EP, Legacy, in 2022, and subsequently a few standalone singles, including an amazing version of their grandfather Sam Cooke's Just Another Day from his early years in gospel with the Soul Stirrers, and now, with Daptone Records, a full album which features a few of the singles released previously. I'm somewhat at a loss, unusual as it may seem, to pick any one track from their recorded works. As part of soul music royalty, Mother Linda and Father Cecil of Womack and Womack fame, with Cecil's brother, the legendary Bobby Womack, their uncle, the sisters have not only inherited the vocal traditions associated with their family heritage, they have created their own sound and style. Listening to I Don't Want You to Say Goodbye, with Kucha's deeply soulful lead vocals, no kidding, I'm reminded of Aretha at her very best in those early Atlantic years, with BG and Zemani providing family harmonies reminiscent of the Franklin sisters, Carolyn and Irma. Now, for those of you who know how much Aretha means to me, know that I don't make such comparisons lightly. The videos supporting their recordings also show retro yet contemporary styling. I confess I think the finger snapping If I Let You is mesmerizing, while Darling, with those 60s beehive wigs, took me back to the era of the Ronettes and some of Motown's finest girl groups early on. It takes a lot to enthuse as much as I have, literally in the last few days, about my personal discovery, a little late although it may be, of the Womack sisters. I've learned that the trio has performed in the UK a few times, as recently indeed at the Jazz Cafe, my least favourite London venue, oh well, in May this year, and later that month at an outdoor festival just 20 minutes from where I live. Oops! I asked my dear friend Michael, with whom I speak frequently, albeit from a few thousand miles away, if he was familiar with Womack Sisters, and he responded with a definitive yes. Yes, y'all, I'm hooked. The Womack Sisters, to quote Shirley Ellis, 1963, and Gladys and the Pips, 1969, get right down to the real nitty-gritty. Believe it. I can't wait to see them live in performance back in the UK. And meanwhile, I'll watch the videos and stream the music on their new self-titled album. And if you like real soul music, I invite you to do the same.